عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا ربكم أعلم بما في نفوسكم إن تكونوا صالحين فإنه كان للأوابين غفورا.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. First, we would like to welcome our distinguished guest, Brother Amir Abdel Malik. Subhanallah, when he walked through the door, he almost knew the whole group. So that means he is in need of no introduction. But Subhanallah, I always, whenever I saw him, I said, Brother Amir, you know what? You easily passed the Sudanese smoke test. and I do believe Abdel Malik Sr. was roaming the desert of Sudan a few centuries back before he was put on a ship and became a buffalo soldier. So it's Alhamdulillah, we met you again and we welcome you in our Sudanese dad. And like in the early days of Islam, there was a Dar al-Arqam where people used to meet, early Muslims meet and plan for their betterment. So here we collectively as a Sudanese community, we humbly rent this place, so for a place of gathering, where we meet for our social events, whether it's happy occasions or sad occasions. Happy occasions, weddings, birthdays, sad occasions, there is any condolences and stuff like that, even if there are some cultural aspects or education aspects. So we are very happy and glad to have you with us today, so we can benefit from your knowledge, inshallah. And also we get to get to know you. And inshallah, this is the start of a series of lectures and visits from you. And I really thank you for accepting the invitation to come today. And also, you know, subhanallah, I wanted to invite you, so I was wondering how to get a hold of you. I see you, but you're always in a rush in the MCA. And I know you have a busy schedule. So subhanallah, after Fajr I went to buy some milk from Safeway, and I was in the line and he was in front of me. So I said, subhanallah, yani plan Allah plan. So it's meant to be, brother. So alhamdulillah, you made it, and we are happy to have you here. So I chose a topic, Islamophobia in the US, because it's something that I think very relevant to our existence in the USA as migrants. Plus, I think it's for us migrants now. It's a perfect storm, especially with the change in the political environment. First of all, of course, we are Muslims, so we come under the Islamophobia, and we happen to be also non-white. And if I use a presidential term also, I think we can be labeled that we're coming from a shithole country if we take the Trump definition. But I think Islamophobia is something that we collectively as Sudanese we need to worry about. If not for us, it's because of the next generation that we have, our kids. Maybe we are immune a little bit because we always have in our back mind that one day we'll go back home and, you know, we settle there. But the reality is our kids, this is the only country they knew, and they have all they're Americans first and then they're Sudanese second. That's whether we like it or not. That's the reality of it. So having a lecture like this helps us to better equip ourselves. So I'm going to spend just 5 minutes, like in every fancy restaurant, you always go by the appetizer first and then you go to the main course. So inshallah I'll do the appetizer part for the first 5 minutes and then it's going to be all yours inshallah. So I did some research on the topic of Islamophobia. So this lecture is in English because it has to be in English, so we apologize, but I think everybody knows English here. So we're going to start inshallah. So the topic is Islamophobia in the US and us, of course hosted by our brother Amir Abdel Malik. So even before we start the lecture, we need to define Islamophobia. So straight from the Webster dictionary, it says it's an irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam. I was very interested in knowing, where this term came from. So based on some research I did, it first appeared back in 1918 by a French scholar. His name is Sulaiman bin Ibrahim, and the word in French is Islamophobia, and he was basically having, he was writing a biography of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Then in English, it first appeared in 1923 and went mainstream in 1997, and then skyrocketed after September 11. This is why now every time you open the news, you will hear the word Islamophobia. It really came into full after September 11. And the word Islamophobia, under the carpet, it has so many negative implications, especially about Islam. And I think it came from the old colonial writings. I took some of the writings from the colonial era, because the colonial era, basically anyone who colonized you, he always justified this by saying, I came to do something better for you. He knows better than you are. He will control your country because he knows how better to manage your affairs. So some of the negative perception are, the Muslim is the natural and irreconcilable enemy of the Christian and the European. Islam is the negation of civilization and barbarism. Bad faith and cruelty are the best one can expect from the Mohammedans. Usually Westerners, when they want to belittle Islam, usually they don't associate Islam, they don't say Islam, they always say Mohammedans. Because when you attribute it to a character, an Arab, a Bedouin, then you kind of, you already nibble into the foundation of the religion. Because Islam in itself, it encompasses all the other prophets, all the other religions, they were all Islam. So, Prophet Ibrahim was a Muslim, Prophet Isa was a Muslim, there is nothing new. We are following their footsteps. So I took some statistics so we know why we are here today. So the statistic, the number of hate groups specifically targeting Muslims has nearly tripled in the last past. This is relative to last year, 2016 and 2015. Researchers at the Southern Poverty Law Center, they attributed the spike in this hatred to Donald Trump campaign. That means when there was a campaign in 2015, it fueled this hatred towards Muslims because of the term that he was calling us with. And basically energized the radical right. It gave them the courage to come forward. Now we have a president who can speak their mind. Then the third point, the number of anti-Muslim organizations known to be operating in the country rose from just 34 in 2015 to 101 in 2016. From the latest FBI statistics show that hate crime against Muslims grew by 67% in 2015. It's the year in which Mr. Trump launched his campaign. The FBI keeps track of hate crimes in the USA. So according to the FBI 2016 report, there was a total of 6,063 incidents against Muslims. There were 7,509 victims and almost 6,000 offenders. The significance of these details is 46.3 of the offenders were whites. Because the president is white, so now the whites, they feel basically superior and they can do what they want. The 2016 report is only half of the story. Why? Because there are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the US. Of these 18,000, only 15,254 agencies participated in the finding. And even out of these 15,000 agencies, less than half report hate crimes. So here I put just some final slide, a map from CARE, which is our Muslim organization, the Council of American Affairs in the Council of American Islamic Relations. So in 2016, actually they put 2014 there were 38 hate crimes. 2015 skyrocketed to 180, and then in 2016 it went to 260. And to the right side, you see the map in the USA, where basically where the hate groups are. You are in the western state of California, so you kind of relatively safe, but don't go to the East Coast. You can see all the red dots. This is where the hate groups are located. In California, I put by counties. The most incident happened in Orange County, Los Angeles, San Diego, Riverside, San Bernardino. Usually in the Bay Area here, because the workforce is so diverse, a lot of migrants, so there is more tolerance. That's why we kind of shield it, but it gives you a false sense of security. Here I listed the sources where I get my statistics from. So this was just my 5-minute introduction into the Islamophobia, so we can know really it's something that we really need to discuss and talk about. So inshallah, Brother Amir will shed light onto him. So brother, this is all yours now.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله أحمده واستعينه واستهديه واستغفره وأؤمن به جل وعلا ولا أغفره وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى والدين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. All praise is due to Allah. I praise Him, I seek His help, I seek His guidance, I ask His forgiveness. I believe in Allah, do not disbelieve in Him, and I bear witness that there's none worthy of worship except Allah. And I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His servant and His messenger. Allah sent him, that is Muhammad, with deen al-haq, for the true way of life. And this true way of life, al-Islam, shall overcome, shall overwhelm all other ways of life, although the mushriks, although those who associate partners with Allah may hate it. Assalamu alaikum. Is that Dana back there? That's one of my students. That's, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Daniel, distraction.
I'm going to be dealing with, inshallah, some history tonight. And I know sometimes our young people, kind of turn off the history. And part of it is not their fault, because sometimes we don't use history, we don't use the past as a way to understand the present. And when you don't do that, history becomes boring. You know what I'm saying? You have to use the past to understand the present. And the history is very critical, and sometimes, for that reason, then, young people are young, that kind of thing. And history is something, back in the day, so it's not relevant. But history is very relevant. It's very relevant. For example, let me give you an example for our young people. Rap. How many people ever heard of mumble rappers? The mumble rappers. There's a trend in rap, and they're called mumble rappers, where rappers, you don't even understand what they're saying. You can't understand what they're saying, so you call them mumble rappers, right? Okay, check us out. All right. How many people have heard of reggae music? Reggae. Bob Marley. Okay, cool. In the 1980s, like Bob Marley, the reggae was like, reggae had some serious messages. Right? So I'm saying like, wow, this is going to be a cultural force. You know what I'm saying? Because the messages, right? So Bob Marley, conveniently, dies of cancer at 36. Peter Tosh is shot and killed. Okay, so after Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, they started having like reggae artists. You couldn't understand what they were saying. Like Shabba Ranks, right? You couldn't understand what he was saying. You couldn't understand what he was saying. So it's like, wait a minute. Reggae had this serious message. Now the reggae artist, you can't understand what they're saying. Flash forward to today. Wow. Rap had a serious message. Some of the rap had a serious message. The power of the word, right? The word, right? And now it's like, they're mumbling. See what history does? Once you know the past, you can understand the present, right? You can understand like what's going on today. So that's not a new thing. But if you don't know your history, you'll fall for the okie doke. Oh yeah, I like that rapper. He can't rap. You don't even know what he's saying. What do you mean you like that rap? He's mumbling. That kind of thing, right? Because you don't know the history, you don't know you've been taken. You've been took. Bamboozled, as Malcolm said, right? So it's very, very important that you have to know the history, right? So I'm going to be getting into some history, inshallah. All right, now, there's action and there's reaction. There's cause and there's effect. The Islamophobia that we are seeing today is a reaction. The Islamophobia that we are seeing today is an effect, right? It's a reaction to something else. And it's very, very important that we understand that today's Islamophobia, war on terrorism, war on all that kind of stuff and so forth, it's a reaction to something. It's not the something itself, it's a reaction. What is the Islamophobia reacting to? The Islamophobia is reacting to the Islamic revival. And we should think about the Islamic revival first, before we think about the reaction. The focus should be on the Islamic revival. Okay, now here comes the history. 1979, something happened in the Muslim world that shook the Muslim world to its foundations. There was an Islamic revolution in Iran. The Shah of Iran was the most powerful puppet in the Muslim world. And he was like deposed through nonviolence, right? The people engaged in civil disobedience. 1979. 1982, the Muslims rose up in Lebanon and gave the Israelis like their only, to that point, the Israelis had never been forced out of anywhere, and they were forced out of Lebanon. 1984 was the rise of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Not the Taliban, definitely not ISIS, but it was the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, going up against Russia. Russia said we'll be there for 1 year. They were there for 10 years, and it destroyed their economy, and the Soviet Union fell. That was 1984. 1987, Palestine shifts from a nationalistic PLO type thing to Islam. 1987. Now, 79, 82, 84, 87. What people who ran this country saw was they saw the rise of Islam. Islam was making a move. Now understand, y'all, we have been a world power, Muslims. We've been here for like at least over 1,400 years. We were a world power for 1,200 out of those 1,400 years. From the time that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received the revelation, Iqra. Now listen to this. From the time that the Prophet Muhammad received the revelation Iqra, which they say was in 610 AD, we had one leader in the Muslim world all the way up till 1920. Prophet, Islam, Khulafa Rashidun, right? And then these caliphs. Now I'm not talking about the quality of these caliphs. Let's not deal with that. But from 610 AD to the 20th century, 1924, we had one leader. So for the first time in our history, we have been without one leader for like 95 years. First time in our history. All right? So we have been a power. We were a power for like at least 1,200 years. People came to us to learn. People came to us to study. We introduced all these things to Europe, the hospital. I mean, I can go on and on. You know what I'm saying? Algebra. That we introduced all these different things to the world, so on and so forth. We were a world power. We were a world power. Then, right, with colonialism and such and so on and so forth, then we lost control. Remember in math, we have some math teachers here now today, right? Remember in math, like basic math, if you're doing a huge number, what do they tell you in math? Let's say you're doing 5 into 842,936. What do they tell you? Break that number up into small pieces. Yeah. Break that number up into small pieces and you will have the problem solved. How do they deal with the Muslim world? Break them up into small pieces. Get the Muslim world, get the Muslims in the Muslim world to focus only on their national identity. That's all. I'm from this country. I'm from that country. I'm from this country. I'm from that country. And focus on that. And by focusing only on our countries, they were able to divide us up, carve us up. They even carved up the Arabic. Now there's Moroccan Arabic and Egyptian Arabic. No Fusha in terms of the Arabic that unites us all. No nationalistic Arabic. Even got to a point, I remember I was in the Haram. I was with a brother from Egypt. There was a sister from Morocco. They were both speaking Arabic, and they couldn't understand each other. And I said, SubhanAllah. I said, SubhanAllah. That's what he did. That's what he did to us. We got a language that unites us from Malaysia to Morocco. We got a language that unites all of us. And what happened? When we were taught to focus on our national identity, we adopted a national Arabic. And now that language that's supposed to unite us all, that language became a source of division. All right? But 1979, 1982, 1984, 1987, what they saw was, okay, this Islam. This Islam is raising its head again. It's raising its head again. And then in 1990, a shift began to occur. What was that shift? You began to see, like, stories in the newspaper. The Islamic threat. Movies started coming out. Siege with Denzel Washington going up against Muslim terrorists, because nobody can go up against a Muslim terrorist like Denzel can, right? So now here's Denzel, and there's these Muslim terrorists, right? Government reports start coming out. Muslims, Islam, jihadists in America, right? That kind of stuff. Now, Malcolm taught us very well. Malcolm said, and if you haven't read the autobiography of Malcolm X, read it yesterday, by Ella Taylor. Malcolm said, before they come into our communities, African Americans, and kill us, they first present the African American community in the media as a community of criminals. That's how they present it. Once the people accept that image of the African American community, then the police can come into our community and do anything they want to us. Because the people have accepted the image of the African American community that they saw on TV. Now, TV and the media began to say some negative things about Islam. And we started telling some of the brothers, he said, all right, look, something's coming. Something's coming. So we have to get ready for the storm that's coming, right? What do you mean? Well, as Muslims, they're going to start coming down on us, and they're going to start coming out. Because we used to tell them back in the day, they coming down on the Shias. Today is the Shia. We told them, today is the Shia. Tomorrow's going to be all of us, right? And then one brother even said, well, brother, I think you're saying that because you're still mad over slavery. I said, well, yeah, but that's not why I'm saying it. You know what I'm saying? That's not why I'm saying it. Like, we understand how this thing goes. We're being presented in the media in a very negative way to justify something that's getting ready to come. And so, 1993, the first World Trade Center bombing. New York. Right? And, of course it was shaky, it was all this stuff. First these Muslims are masterminds, and then they mess around and leave their ID at the scene of the crime. Okay. These masterminds left their ID at the scene of the crime. Okay. Right? That kind of thing, right? And so that was coming, and then more and more things started happening. Okay, y'all, it's coming. Like, get ready. So the 90s, the 80s was, in the late 70s and the 80s was like, whoa, Islam is really coming up. The 90s was, okay, let's get ready to take this on. Let's get ready to take this on. So, of course, when 2001 came, that was the lead up. That was the lead up. All right? That's how this goes. That's how this goes. And so, what they were dealing with was the rise of Islam. That's what they were dealing with. Islam is making moves. And even to this day, like the president said, these countries, as whole countries and so on and so forth, right? Why don't they just come from Norway? Why don't they just come from Norway? Mr. President, like, check this out. Like, the most common name in Norway is Muhammad. The most common name in Norway is Muhammad. The most common name in England is Muhammad. Because, see, there's a problem. See, what happened was they realized, and again, there go to Malcolm. And what they said was his last speech. He said, now check this out. Check out this analysis. He said what the West is concerned about is that there are people of color outside the West, Africa, Asia, Latin America, so on and so forth. And they are rising up. And he said, and there are large numbers of people of color inside the West. And he said, and they are concerned about the people of color outside the West who are standing up, having an influence and an effect on the people of color who are inside the West. Okay, now, erase people of color. Put Muslim. And that's what you got today. Erase people of color and put Muslim. And that's a major concern today. Now, the other component. Something happened on February 6, 1899 that 99% of Americans don't know about. February 6, 1899. February 6, 1899, the U.S. Senate votes for America, to allow America to become an empire. February 6, 1899. Right? And we're going to take the Philippines. That's what I'm saying. So should we take the Philippines, so on and so forth? And they voted yes. Yes. So America becomes an empire on February 6, 1899. And now, everybody in the world knows that America's an empire. Africans know, Asians know, Latinos know. The only people who don't know that America's an empire are Americans. America's an empire. It's an empire. It's the largest, strongest, richest empire in the history of the world. It's an empire, right? And that's very important to understand. It's an empire. And everything an empire does serves the benefit of the empire. The universities are used for the benefit of the empire. The businesses and corporations are used for the benefit of the empire, right? The media is used for the benefit of the empire, right? Everything is used to serve the empire, all right? And so America is an empire. It's an empire. Now, as an empire, America is showing some major signs of decline. Major signs of decline. Because as all empires go, right, morality within, corruption begins to spread within. They're global overstretch, like they're just stretched out too far. Empire becomes too much empire becomes too expensive. And now you have to direct your resources towards other things, right? So America is not really broke. America only looks broke because the money is being diverted. It's being diverted to war, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on and so forth. Now check this out, and this happens to all empires. They become on the verge of bankruptcy, and they have to make a decision: are we going to go through with empire, or we're going to back up and just go with a republic? All empires had to deal with that. Rome had to deal with that. Britain had to deal with that. America had to deal with that too. Do you know, like, if you take, like, this is supposed to be 2018, right? 2018 years since the time of Jesus, peace be upon him. That's their calendar. If you take 2018 and times that by 365, you'll get about 735,000. So if we said, okay, Jesus was here 1,800 years ago, 2018, right? How many days is that? 2018 times 365. Am I right, math teacher? Am I right, math professor? I'm right so far. Okay, now, so if you take 2018 times 365, it's 735,000. Now, suppose for each day of 735,000 days, for each day I spent $1 million. Let's say I spent $1 million every single day since the time of Jesus. $1 million a day. For 735,000 days, I spent $1 million a day. You would not have $1 trillion. You would not have $1 trillion. You have about like $735 billion. You would not have $1 trillion if you spent $1 million a day from the time of Jesus up till now. You would not have $1 trillion. They have spent $14 trillion on these wars. You will go bankrupt after a while. And then while they're doing that, while they're redirecting all this money, the rich are paying less money. Corporations are paying less money. the middle class and the lower middle class are paying more taxes. There's less money. There's less money. And that money that's there is going towards war. And now what do you have as a result? You have the widest gap between the rich and the poor in this country's history. The widest gap between the rich and the poor. Do you know 50% of the American people are either in or near poverty? 50%. They don't show that on TV, do they? Not in America. Not America. America. Where the streets are paved with gold. Where $20 bills grow from the trees. America. 50% of the people in America are either in or near poverty. But they're not talking about that. They have roads that need fixing, bridges that are literally falling, pipes in cities that are so old that they're exploding. The infrastructure in this country is like crumbling, and the number of poor people is increasing. And what they know is happening. Whenever you get a society in which there's a gap between the rich and the poor, you have a social powder keg on your hand. That's why young people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instituted zakat. Zakat in one of the 5 pillars. What does zakat do? Zakat is money that's taken from those who have and is given from those who don't have. So the gap between the rich and the poor in a Muslim society is not supposed to do this, it's supposed to do this because of zakat. All right? But when you get greedy and your philosophy is more is not enough. More is not enough. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more, which means there has to be more and more poor people. That puts pressure on the society. So there are those of us who say that another 60s type period of social activism is coming. It's coming, right? It's actually already here, but it hasn't reached a point of critical mass yet. But it's actually already here. There's an awakening that's occurring. And so while this Muslim awakening is taking place outside of the West, the fastest growing religion inside the West is Islam. Now, what do you think they're thinking about? The other thing is, these attempts to take our civil liberties away. When I say ours, I mean Muslims. That's not actually for us. We are being used as the excuse to do it. You know who that's really for? That's for the American people. Because there's another period of social upheaval coming. We're being used as the excuse to take civil liberties away. But it's not for us, it's for the American people. And let me give you an example. Remember when Trump, Allah is in charge. Allah is in charge. Because see, that idiot being in office, this is perfect. This is perfect, right? So when Trump, remember the first ban that Trump did? The first ban? Okay, let me tell you something. Something happened that never happened in this country's history. Americans, mostly white, shut down airports all over this country. That has never happened before in this country, where airports all over the country were shut down. They shut down those airports all across this country because of what was happening to Muslims. Right? Mostly white folks. See, there is something brewing and building in this country. Whereas on the right-wing side, you have white folks. On the other side, you got black folks, white folks, brown folks, Muslims, right? And so you have this multicultural thing that's jumping off, and that's very difficult for them to deal with, the system. And so you have something that's really brewing and building. That's really a good thing. Because now there are people who believe that Muslims, now check this out. After 2001,
September 11th, Muslims. And they spent all that money to get people to look at us as Muslims, monsters. And now, the people, those demonstrations of thousands and thousands of people of all colors, they look at Muslims as being a part of the oppressed. That's Allah. That's Allah. It wasn't because of our dawah, right? It's Allah. That we went from becoming the monsters to almost everybody, to now we are seen as being a part of the oppressed. Now, I'm not talking about them right-wing, I ain't talking about them, right? But we are looked at as being part of the oppressed. So when you see these thousands and thousands of demonstrations on over 1,000 people, Muslims are there on the scene. See, Allah's in charge. Allah's in control. He's in control. So now, as this thing heats up, and we are in a period of tajdeed, we are in a period of Islamic revival. Do you know what a blessing it is to be in a period of Islamic revival? The type of rewards that Allah gives you for being in a period of Islamic revival. And I have to say to the youth, and see, the reason why I'm focusing partly on the youth is because we are 1.6 billion strong in the Muslim world. There are about 1.6 billion Muslims. Guess what? 60 to 65% of that 1.6 billion are 30 years old and under. Did you hear what I said? 60 to 65% of the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world are 30 years old and under. Go back to that issue of Time magazine, February 2000, the Arab Spring, 2016? Arab Spring 2016? About 2016. On the cover of that Time magazine, there was a picture of Egyptian youth, and it said the generation changing the world, and they were dealing with Egypt at that time. In the middle of the Time magazine, they dealt with a population breakdown of Muslim countries in the so-called Muslim East, Middle East. I'll say the Muslim East. And they gave the percentage of population, Morocco, Sudan, Somalia, Philistine. They gave the percentage of the population that was 30 years old and under. It was like 65% in countries, 72%, 74%, all in the Muslim world. This Islamic revival is riding on the backs of our youth all over the world. And one of the things that's happening is that Muslim youth are coming back to Islam. And it's very, very critical that you know that. Muslim youth are coming back to Islam. Now, there are some Muslim youth out there, yeah, who have amnesia. They don't know who they are in terms of as Muslims, right? But Muslim youth, one of the trends that we're seeing is that Muslim youth are coming back to Islam, and it usually starts taking place in college. It usually starts happening in college, at the university, right? They're coming back. So now, the question becomes, what is our role? What is our role? Now, when I say what is our role, okay, I'm going to be real blunt with you. I'm just going to be real blunt with you, all right? I'm talking about black people's role. African Americans. What is our role? Right? And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's a particular role that we have got to embrace, understand, and appreciate, because that role is vital to what's needed today. Now, what I'm going to give you, and I know, and I know our youth are dealing with this, right? Y'all in America, right? And y'all like stuck in between two worlds. Some people see you as black, white people see you as black, and black people see you as what you is. When they see the hair, they see the complexion, okay, the complexion, okay, cool. They see the hair and say, hold on, wait, hold on. Stop this show right here. Stop this show. What is you? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, you're almost like caught in between two worlds. Okay, well, check this out. Let me try to help in that situation. Y'all black people.
Yep.
Y'all black people. You know what I'm saying? And we are all Africans. But see, when you see African Americans, you have to see us as the descendants of Africans who were taken out of Africa, brought to the New World, enslaved, and we are still feeling the effects of that experience. When you see African Americans, when you look at us. That's how you have to look at us. Still feeling the effects of that experience. That for some of us, it is easier to call ourselves niggas than to call ourselves African. Still feeling the effects of that experience. Still dealing with our self-esteem issues, right? Our self-esteem problems. Still dealing with those things. That's what Malcolm and them had to address, right? And Malcolm, as a part of liberating our minds, was telling us, pointing to us, you Africans. You Africans, right? And that's what's really critical, because let me say this real quick. The way that you make a slave, and the way that they made us into slaves, one of the things that they did, was they took away our language, they took away our names, they took away our religion, they stripped us down to nothing. Understand this. They stripped us down to nothing. To the point to where it's our names. Washingtons and Smiths don't come from Africa. But they stripped us of whoever owned us. That's what our name was. If you were owned by somebody named Johnson, your name was Johnson. That's why we call them slave names. We call them slave names. What's your slave name? That type of thing, right? Johnsons and Smiths don't come from Africa. Those are the names of the people who owned us, who owned our ancestors. So our leaders, when our leaders rose up, one of the main things our leaders had to do with us was to deal with our inferiority complex, had to deal with our self-esteem issues, had to deal with our identity. And so at the core of it was them to get us to see that we were an African people. So you young people, and when brother was saying like y'all see yourselves as Americans first and then Sudanese and so on and so forth, that type of thing, check this out. If you cut yourselves off from your homeland, if you cut yourself off from your homeland, you are making yourself into a slave. Because that's what they did to us. And they whipped us to do it. If you do it, and you ain't even being whipped, you're not even being tortured, and you cutting yourself off from your homeland, so you don't want to go, you don't want to see what you're a part of, where you come from, you don't want to deal with the language, you don't want to deal with the culture, you don't want to go back and see how young people are supposed to treat older people, you don't want to go back and see family and community, you don't want to go back and see that, you are making yourself into a slave. I'm telling you this as an African American, as a descendant of slaves. You are taking the process of slavery and you are putting it on yourself without anybody making you do it. Because if they saw us speaking anything, any language that came from Africa, acting in any way that came from Africa, many of us were beaten. They wanted to take Africa out of our identity. And many of us were Muslims. And many of us struggled to hold on to that identity as much as we could. But after hundreds of years, it became more subtle. Our African identity, our Africanity became more subtle. It became more subtle. You feel me? And guess what happened? Guess what happened that made us start coming back to Islam? Some of our leaders went where? To Africa. And saw Islam. And came back here and told African Americans, hey, we need to become Muslims. We need to become Muslims. Right? After going to Africa. Whenever they showed us images of Africa, it was always the bush. It was always the bush. That's like me, somebody never saw America, and I showed them pictures of Nebraska. Here's America. Here's America. What? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, there's no trees in America. Yeah, that's America. You know what I'm saying? Kansas, Nebraska. They showed us images of Africa. The type of images, and then check this out. They never showed us African Muslims. it was always Africans who had a tribal religion. They never showed us African Muslims until 1977. What was 1977? Roots. Kunta Kinte. The first 4 episodes of Roots, Islam was all in it. The first 4 episodes. Islam was, that's the first time they showed black Africans on the continent who were Muslims at the end of the 20th century. They didn't want us to see that. They didn't want us to see black people as Muslims, because what would that mean? That means that Islam is a part of black people's heritage. They didn't want us to know that. Even though, especially at that time, we didn't know, at that time, we know now, that many of the slaves who were brought over here were Muslims. Were Muslims. And we didn't know. We didn't have the information at that time. So, y'all black people.
That's why it comes down.
Yeah.
No cerro.
We black people. Now, I'm going to give you 8 things. I'm going to give you 8 things that gives you an indicator of what our role is in this next phase that we're dealing with. I'm going to give you 8 things. See if this don't sound familiar. All right? I want to give you 8 characteristics that we have as black people, as Africans. See if this don't sound familiar. All right, ready? Here we go. History has always shown, history back then, history in America, that when we got a hold of Islam, we took it. We took it. Like, we took this thing. Like, I can show you black people in America, right, who don't know a stitch of Arabic, who would die for Islam. Would die for Islam. The way that, we just take it, right? And that relates to number 2. The term is istiqama. Istiqama, right? That you just like, you may be going through some serious stuff, but you will not give in. You will not blow. Right? Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Like, there's Bilal, right? On the hot sand. Giant rock on his chest. And Bilal was saying, Ahadun Ahad. Ahadun Ahad. Ahadun Ahad. Sometime after that, some of the companions asked Bilal, hey man, why was you saying that? Why was you saying Ahadun Ahad when he was torturing you like that? Bilal said, I was trying to figure out what I could say that could make him madder. I told you. Ain't that just like a black man? ain't that us? Ain't that us? Don't tell the truth. Ain't that us? He's torturing his torturer. See, y'all think that Bilal was calling the Adhan because of his nice voice? A little bit more than that, y'all. It was a little bit more than a nice voice. A little bit more than that, right? He's torturing his torturer. Ahadun Ahad. And I knew that would make him the maddest. See, that's us. That's who we are. That's it. That's who we are. We got like istiqama. Like, yeah, bring it. That kind of thing, right? That's how we are. That's how we are over there. That's how we are back then. That's how we are here. Right? Y'all know. Now, check this out. We also had the reputation of being fierce fighters. Come on. We had the reputation of being fierce fighters. When they wanted to martyr Hamza, radiallahu anhu, what did they do? Abyssinian. Watch. Hey man, take care of this problem for us. Right? When the Muslims went into Egypt and went further down into Nubia, Muslims got whooped. No, it was like this. The Muslims would say, no. The Nubians would say, hey, where y'all want this next arrow? This is from the Muslims saying this. Where y'all want this next arrow? And the Muslim would say, put it right here. And they did. They put it right in the place. There's a Muslim relating this. They put it right in the place where he said it. Where you want this next one? Put it right here. Bam! Put it right there. So my man wrote back to the governor of Egypt, man. Like, we can't do nothing with them. And what did he say? Leave him alone. They left him alone. And the Nubians later on became Muslim. We just have a reputation for being fierce fighters. That's how it is over here. Boxing, getting the boxing, we're going to take it over. Now, MMA, we're going to take MMA over. We got a reputation for being fierce fighters. This don't sound familiar to you? Yeah. We got a reputation. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Influence. Now, check this out. Don't you notice other people try to be like us? If you want to see what youth are doing in America, look at black youth. Whatever black youth are doing in America, that's what American youth are doing. That's what they're doing. You even hear Asians out there saying, oh, that's my nigga. That's my nigga. Other people of other races imitate us. Y'all notice that?
Yeah.
If you go to like a Taylor Swift, not saying you should. If you go to a Taylor Swift concert, it's going to be basically all white people there.
Yeah.
You go see Beyonce, not saying you should. You go see Beyonce, there'll be black, white, brown. We have an influence over people of different races. Y'all notice that, right? Okay. Now, okay, what's the role of a people who have influence over different races, and they also have with them a religion, if I can use that terminology, that's for all people?
Say that again.
Right? They have influence of people of different races, and they have a religion that's for all people. Y'all starting to get this?
Yeah.
And so what our role is? All right? So, in management, whoever has influence is the leader. In any organization, whoever has the influence, that's actually the leader. Influence equals leadership. In any organization. So if you have influence, that's leadership. That's leadership. All right? Okay, let's keep going. We have a very deep love for justice, and we hate injustice. I'm gonna tell you how we are. I'm gonna tell you, this is us. We love justice, and we hate, it's intense, injustice. Okay, first example. When the Muslims were being persecuted, where did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tell the Muslims to go? Abyssinia. Why? Because there is a king there who is never wronged. No one is ever wronged in his kingdom. Why? He's about justice. No one is ever wronged in his kingdom. All right? So now, you think that's like a East African thing? Okay. Another example. Ibn Battuta, the explorer, went all over the world. And one of the places he goes to is Mali. Timbuktu. Let me read what he says. This is Ibn Battuta talking about the brothers and sisters in Mali, the Muslims there. Quote, they are seldom unjust and have a great abhorrence for injustice. Abhorrence means serious hatred. They have a great abhorrence for injustice than any other people. Do you know how many people Ibn Battuta saw in his travels? He said, these people here have a hatred for injustice than any other people that I've ever seen. Their sultan shows no mercy to anyone who is guilty of the least act of injustice. He shows no mercy. There is complete security in their country. Neither traveler nor inhabitant in it has anything to fear from robbers or men of violence. We do not like injustice. Hate it. So when they tell you about here, the angry black man, oh, he's an angry black man. Oh, she's an angry black woman. 9 times out of 10, that black man or that black woman is angry over some type of injustice. Injustice is always at the core of it. Are you getting this picture? Fierce fighters, istiqama, hate injustice. All right? Hold on. Okay. Interpretation of phenomena. Yusuf alayhi salam, it was said that Yusuf was able to interpret dreams. But the word actually that's used is not just dreams, that he could interpret dreams, stories, he can interpret events, and so on and so forth, that type of thing, right? That's our thing too. We know how to interpret stuff. You want to get an idea? Just read Malcolm. Read Malcolm. We know how to interpret things. We really do. Like, for example, some reporter came to Malcolm and said to him, I'm coming to a close, and said to him, what do you think is the most significant thing that happened in 1964? He said Malcolm paused. He said he thought Malcolm was going to say the Voting Rights Act bill that was signed by Congress. He said Malcolm paused and Malcolm said, the fact that China detonated the bomb. The fact that China detonated the bomb. What the heck? Look how Malcolm interpreted that. When China detonated the bomb, Malcolm interpreted that as, now here's another country of color that has technology. And that country of color could be an alternative to Russia. All right? Instead of having to go from one European to another European, we have a country now in the so-called third world that has technology. And that could be an alternative, right? And so Malcolm talked about how China, instead of, can actually help more of other third world countries instead of Russia. Not long after that, China starts making inroads into Africa. Notice China's role in Africa? China also gave asylum, for example, to some Black Panthers who were here in America. Some of them went to China and received asylum in China. All right? Malcolm was able to interpret things in such a way. And that's something that we have. That's something that we have. That's something that we know how to do. We can interpret things, right? Events and so on and so forth. Okay. Brothers and sisters, check this out. There is, as you know, a liberation struggle of black people in this country. There's a struggle for liberation. It's about 500 years old. About 500 years old, a struggle for liberation in this country. Do you know that some of the most powerful leaders in this struggle for liberation for 500 years, some of the most powerful leaders in this struggle were either Muslims or in some way affiliated with Islam? Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey had the largest African-American organization in this country's history. There was 6 million people in his organization. Have you ever seen red, black, and green? You ever see the colors red, black, and green? RBG, red, black, and green, right? Marcus Garvey, who was from Jamaica, came up with that. Red, black, and green. That's an African-American flag. Red stands for the blood that we shed in our struggle for liberation. Black stands for the people, and green stands for the land of Africa, right? Red, black, and green, right? He came up with that in 1920s. Marcus Garvey was taught by a brother by the name of Dusay Muhammad Ali. And it wasn't a coincidence that Marcus Garvey, when he came up with his slogan, He begins his slogan with a statement of Tawheed. One God, one aim, one destiny. That was from his influence by Dusay Muhammad Ali. Elijah Muhammad, affiliated with Islam, the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, come on. Muhammad Ali, come on. Some of the most powerful, influential leaders in the struggle for African American liberation were either Muslims or affiliated in some way with Islam. The first slave revolt that took place in the New World took place on the plantation of Christopher Columbus's son. It was led by Muslims. And in the Caribbean, in Central America, in South America, it was, in the United States, it was common for African uprisings, slave revolts, to be led by Muslims. So much so that the Spanish crown outlawed Muslims coming to the New World. Do not bring Muslims to the New World. There was 5 laws, 5 pieces of anti-Muslim legislation by the Spanish crown. Do not bring Muslims to the New World. Why? Because they are hooking up with the Native Americans and they are revolting against slavery, our slave system. So it was common for African uprisings to be led by Muslims. African uprisings led by Muslims. African uprisings led by Muslims. Malcolm X. African uprisings led by Muslims. Muhammad Ali. African uprisings led by Muslims. That was a very common theme. That's why they said we must prevent the rise of a Messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. Malcolm X might have been such a Messiah. That's what they wrote. So for them, the quote-unquote Messiah was an African American male Muslim. And lastly, our scholarship. The Islamic scholastic tradition of Africa, particularly Black Africa, is very underrated. It's very underrated. If you ever get a chance, please read this book, The African Caliphate. The African Caliphate, dealing with the Caliphate of Uthman Dan Fodio in Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate, where he built a caliphate. And this caliphate that he built had a major effect on African Americans over here coming back to Islam. Had a major effect. But you have to read this book. And understand too, I want you youth to pick this up as well. Now, when they brought us over here, we were from different tribes. But after a while, what started happening?
Coming back together.
We started coming together. Tribes didn't mean nothing. Tribes meant nothing. And what started happening? When we started looking towards Africa, we saw Africa as one place. The concept of looking at Africa as one place came from Africans who were not on the continent. Now I understand. We got our tribal thing jumping off and so on and so forth. I understand. So I don't wanna, cool. All right. However, when we see Africa, we see it as one. We see it as one. And that came from our situation over here. So I don't want you to not read this because this is dealing with West Africa. Africa was called by some scholars the Bilad al-Sudan, the land of the blacks. And what is now Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, so on and so forth, that was called the Eastern Sudan. And what's now Nigeria, Sierra Leone, so on and so forth, that was called the Western Sudan. It was all called Sudan. All of it. I'm not just saying that because y'all from Sudan. I'm just saying, but it's real. It's real. It was all called Sudan. It was just whether or not you were from the Eastern Sudan or the Western Sudan. It all was called that. And so I understand the whole, the tribe thing too, but we also have to have an understanding that we have to be able to see ourselves as one. Yeah, there's Sudanese, there's Somalis, there's Eritreans, so on and so forth. And we understand. But the way we see it,
All Sudanese.
they're all black. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's how we look at it. That's how we see it. And so you can honor your home, you can honor your traditions and so on and so forth. I'm not saying totally get rid of it, but you also have to balance it out with the ability to see us all as one. Because we have the same type of personality, we got the same type of, it's like the same. You know, there's a common thread that runs through all of our personalities. It's a common thread. Whether you're on that side, whether you're on this side, whether you're here in America, it's a common thread that runs through all. So we have to understand what that common thread is and embrace it. And embrace it. And that's very, very critical. So our youth, yeah, you got to balance an act. You do. You got to balance an act. But check this out. When black people look at you and say, what you is, right? Like use that as a dawah opportunity. I'm from Africa. I'm from Africa. That's where many of our people are from. Many of our people are from Africa. That's your ancestors are from Africa. Use it as dawah. Because now what it does is, it teaches black people that Islam is a part of our heritage. Islam is a part of our heritage just by them seeing you. And then you can throw something around, you ain't read Malcolm? Throw that at them. You know what I'm saying? You ain't read Malcolm? That don't trip them out, you know what I'm saying? Because you know Malcolm and they don't, you know what I'm saying? You say, man, you ain't read Malcolm? Malcolm talked about Africa, man. Malcolm talked about Africa. Malcolm said we was all, you ain't into Malcolm? And they'll feel all bad. They'll feel all like, you know what I'm saying, that kind of thing, right? But use it as a dawah mechanism. Yeah, I'm from Africa. I'm from Africa. You know what I'm saying? And you are too. Y'all just forgot, that's all. Y'all just forgot. Y'all went through slavery, they made y'all forget. Right? But we your long lost brothers. You know what I'm saying? No, seriously. Use it as a dawah opportunity. Don't just get settled with just being stuck in between two worlds. You African and we African. We just come from different experiences. That's all. We come from different experiences. Yeah. Bring it to them. No, bring it to them. Even if they like try to like fight, not fight you physically, but like resist. No, keep bringing it. Throw Malcolm out. Throw the Panthers out. You know what I'm saying? It's very important that you understand our history. Read about Muhammad Ali. Read about Malcolm. Read about, that's your history too. Because you Muslims and because you African. That's your history too. When Black History comes in February, the shortest month, all right, no problem. But it's like, so when Black History comes, that's your history too. That's your history too. Black history is your history too. And one of the things y'all should do is y'all should have programs on your campus dealing with Malcolm or Muhammad Ali. These are two figures that are major figures in African American history, and they were Muslim. So by you having a program about Malcolm, you're bringing the two together. When you have a program about Muhammad Ali, you're bringing the two together. And then our people will begin to understand where you're coming from. So don't be just settled in terms of being stuck in between two worlds. Use it. Use it. And when white folks say you black, yes, I'm from Africa and I'm a Muslim. Because see, one of the things we're going to do now, I'll come to a close on this. These rednecks, here's what we want. When these rednecks think about you Muslimics, you know what I'm saying? You Muslimics, you when they think about Islam, we don't want them to think about y'all, meaning that like immigrants. We want them to first think about us. Us. Because when they deal with us, it's a different thing. It's like we used to be in demonstrations, for example, and there would be a cowboy out there, and he says, "Go back where you came from," right? and then we would say, there'd be some African man, we'd say, "Hey man, what you say?" We get kooky and everything, right? What'd you say? And he was like, oh, I'm not talking to you. I'm just talking. You know what I'm saying? That's how they do it. That's how they do it. So see, when these rednecks, when they think about Islam and Muslims, if they think about us first, don't think immigrant, think us first. That'll put them on the defensive because they know how we roll. You know what I'm saying? And where are you going to deport us to? Deport us to back to New York? Philadelphia? Where are we going to get deported to? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's a different roles that we have different roles. Different roles and responsibilities. So we have a responsibility to play the role that we can play because, we know them. Nobody knows Uncle Sam like we do. We are sheikhs of Uncle Sam. We know how he cooks his food. We know how he raises his children. We know how he walks. We know how he talks. We know how he thinks because we served him. We served him in Pharaoh's house. We know Pharaoh. We know Pharaoh. And Pharaoh knows that we know Pharaoh. And so we have to use that knowledge that we have of Pharaoh. We got to use it on Pharaoh. Right? So that's part of what our responsibility is, right? So we all have a role in this. So as this thing heats up, let me be very clear, as I close for the 8th time, let me be very clear, as this thing heats up, y'all with us. Y'all are with us. Y'all with us. Y'all with us. No, y'all with us. You know what I'm saying? And Islam is poised to play a major role in this next phase. This next phase is taking place. This next phase of social Islam is poised to play a major role in it. A major role. And so I'm just, I'll leave you with the fact that no, we are in a period of Islamic revival. So this is a good period. It's a good period. This period is so good they got to come up with different stuff. Because this revival is so serious. But we need our youth, we need you to be involved. We need you to be involved. If you're in high school, join an MSA. If you are in college, university, join an MSA. And bring these qualities that I mentioned earlier, bring these qualities to the table. Bring these qualities to the table that we have. Allah gave us these qualities. And if we don't do it, if we don't use them, He's going to humiliate us. Because He prepared us for something. He prepared us for a certain role. He fashioned us for a certain role. If we don't play that role, He's going to punish us. He's going to humiliate us. You know what I'm saying? So go get these blessings. You know what I'm saying? Jazakallah khair. I'm sorry I went too long. It's really an honor to be here. You know how there are people who are prejudiced against people? Like, I'm prejudiced for Sudanese. You know what I'm saying? It's like in Oakland and stuff, the closest relationships that we had was with our Palestinian brothers and sisters and with our Sudanese brothers and sisters. That was like, and when we had close relationships with others, but the biggest one was the Palestinians and the Sudanese. Because all y'all troublemakers, you know what I'm saying? We love troublemakers. Just like all here,